Hello and welcome back to Dream Girl. I am Sheen, your host, and today my guest is Arora Akanksha. Arora is a 34-year-old Indian-Canadian audit coordinator at the UN. She comes from a family of refugees. She was born in India, raised in India and Saudi Arabia, and settled in Canada. She announced her candidacy to challenge incumbent UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in the 2021 United Nations leadership election. She is the first woman and first millennial candidate for the position, and the first known candidate to challenge an incumbent. If selected, Arora would be the youngest ever and first female Secretary General of the UN in its 76-year history, which is incredible. Okay, hi Arora, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited for this chat. I know we've been planning this for like a couple months now. You actually right after my New York Times article. So
Literally, I found you from the New York Times article and I was just blown away, and I've been stalking you since, and I was like, okay, we need to chat. So I'm really glad we finally made time for this. First question.
Yes, thank you.
Why do you go by Arora instead of Akanksha?
So I went to boarding school, and like in boarding school, you're known by your last name. Your shirts have your last name, your sports jersey, everything. Your your shirts are marked, your skirts are marked, because you have common laundry. So everyone has always called me Aurora.
Okay.
Aurora. In the U.S., like Aurora is. So in my I remember moving to the U.S. at that time, you have to open bank accounts and stuff like that. So even my bank accounts are Aurora because people call that the first name. So it's always been stuck with me. With that said, I go by both, to be honest with you. I know when I meet an Indian person, for them saying Akanksha is so easy that I'm like, yeah, Akanksha. But it's, like I said, I'm okay with both, but if I have to choose, I'll just say
okay. I guess, because Aurora can be a white name as well, right? So that's probably why they think that this is your first name. But very interesting.
Yeah.
I personally think Akanksha is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful name, right? Because names with K's are very rare, that the sound is really nice, but I think that's a beautiful name. But yeah, let's start from the beginning. As you mentioned, so you have Indian backgrounds, but then you grew up in different places. So walk us through the journey. Where did Akanksha's journey start?
So it started with my grandparents. They're all refugees. They moved from Pakistan to India in 1947 after the partition. On my dad's side, my grandparents were street vendors. They sold tea and samosas, and they couldn't even complete their education after the partition. On my mom's side, my granddad was the only working member. Again, couldn't complete education. He was a mailman with the government. He would deliver mail on bicycle. So their goal was on both sides to educate their children so they could have a future, so they could have a better future than them. So my parents are one of the first physicians in their respective areas. So I was born in a family that values education and hard work. So I was born in 1986, July 31st, the same day as Harry Potter.
Oh, check you out. Great knowledge.
Yeah, that's another story, the whole Harry Potter love affair. But So I had a really nice childhood. I was first girl from my mom's side. After 3 boys, I was super pampered by my grandmother. I mean, both my grandmothers, but of course more by my maternal grandmother. And my nickname, and back in the day, for all millennials in India, we all had nicknames that were so different than our own names. Like my nickname is Gurrib.
That means doll, right? Yeah, okay.
That means doll. So everyone, even today, calls me Guriya, which is why, when you ask that name question, to be honest, I actually have a huge identity in my nickname in India. And everyone, even cousins, cousins and aunts, neighbors, they're all like Guriya. So anyhow, so it was fun childhood. I would visit my grandparents regularly, my mom's in Gurgaon, weekends on my dadi and dadaji in Punjab. Almost twice a month. When I was 6, we moved to Saudi. And Saudi was, I had a really good time in Saudi. We were close to where Yemen is, it was southwestern side of Saudi. There was beaches, there were mountains, and it was greenery too. Surprisingly, people think it's desert, but no, there is greenery and mountains there too. Our neighbors were a family of 10, and 3 girls were my age. And Ramadan, which is going on now, we would go to their house and have dinner with them, and they would come to our place. it was really nice. And back in the day, like this is 92, we didn't have internet. So they helped my dad buy his first car in Saudi, show him where the
Oh,
grocery
wow.
stores are and all
Yeah.
those other necessities. So it was really nice. We had school in Saudis, but in Arabic. So I couldn't pick up the language for math, science, social studies. So I was homeschooled. And then at the age of 9, my parents were like, we've homeschooled you as much as we could. Now it would be good if you could like, get a proper education. So I went back to India in boarding school. And at 18, I moved to Canada for college. And Canada is a very warm and welcoming country to all immigrants. So I had a great time in Canada. I graduated summa cum laude. I became a manager with PricewaterhouseCoopers. What else did I do? I wrote audit standards for Canada. I taught at the University of Toronto, and I wrote campaign financing guide, 3 of them. So I was going around, in audit as a profession, and one day I get a call from the UN. And that's what changed a lot of things for me. So the call was, the context was that Donald Trump was selected as the president of US, and so was the current Secretary General. And reforms were a big agenda for US. They contribute $10 billion that the US administration was like, we need to make sure the money is used wisely. So for the Secretary General, financial reforms was a huge portfolio, and I was called to assist with that.
Okay.
And so that's how I made my way to the UN from being born in
Great.
India.
Well, this is so fascinating, right? Because you grew up and then you had so many life experiences in so many countries. Surely this has impacted your personality so much, right? Do you see the difference in you? Like, for example, I can just give you an example for me, right? So I grew up in Mauritius, but originally my ancestors are from India, but we can't retrace them. But there is such a big impact of the culture. We're still, I understand Hindi and Urdu, and, the way we dress, like the Desi outfit is still that. But we are still African who live in Mauritius, and now I'm in the UK. So it's a bit of a mix of everything where you feel like you don't belong anywhere because you're so different to everyone. Do you feel the same?
I know exactly what you mean, and I feel like I don't have that sense of I don't belong. I just feel I belong to everyone, and everyone belongs to me. So I feel that sense of humanity, and I think it goes back to I was also raised as a human and not even as a girl per se. I didn't realize gender differences until quite late in life. So I was raised as you're a human, and every human has common needs of love, affection. They want to grow, progress, contribute. So I think being raised in different countries, I've seen that. No matter language or physical differences, like in someone from Saudi or someone from India or Canada, we all have same needs, and I've always related to that. And I think UN is, when I joined the UN, of course, that was even a bigger shock at that. Now you have people from all countries. At least when you're in Saudi, it's everyone is either Saudi or a couple Asian, Southeast Asian. In India, everyone is Indian. So now you have everyone. So I think that's when I realized that we're all so same. We distinguish ourselves based on our gender, nationality, and other differences. By the end of the day, we're all same. And I think that really allows me to relate with everyone. And I know, so I backpacked a lot, rite of passage for every person,
Of course.
college and stuff. And I think that's what I've realized, that it's just so interesting how everyone, when they travel, feel that same sense. Wow, we're all alike. And I remember someone I was speaking to the other day, and they were telling me only 3% of people in the entire world have left their home state.
Wow.
Yeah, and I know for someone like you and I who've traveled extensively and have different cultures that made us who we are, it's just 3% of the world population that's traveled. So I think that's so interesting. Because for me, it's all humans. Everyone feels pain the same way. If your loved one is sick, your heart hurts the same way. We all need love the same way.
I agree.
Love.
I agree. I think this is such a good message as well, because we just divide ourselves for very arbitrary reasons that we shouldn't, right? We're all different and we bring different things to the table, and that's great. But at the end of the day, we're all the same. So that's exactly true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that allows us to then have common goals too, and common aspirations. Because if we move away from differences, it's just there's so much great to be done. The pie can be expanded instead of being split.
Yes. Okay. So you mentioned boarding school. How was that? How was your experience of boarding school?
It's so interesting. No one has ever asked me that question, so now it's, this is the first time I've been asked that. I mean, it was no, actually, I just realized. I think I do remember that for Al Jazeera.
Okay.
I asked that. um, it was interesting. I think you. I mean, I have like few memories that I try to remember. Everything else I try to forget. I think the few things I remember is I did not unpack for
Oh,
a few
wow.
months. So the story was my parents left me, like, coming from Saudi, like, where I had my little brother there, who was, of course, the love of my life. I was like, oh my goodness, my baby brother. And then we had those three girls my age in my neighborhood. I didn't have that many people my age. So when I remember my first night in boarding school, my parents lived in the guest house and I was in the hostel. And I was just so thrilled that there were so many kids my age. I was like, oh my goodness, this is so nice. And I remember my parents asking me the next day for breakfast. They're like, so should we leave? Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, bye-bye. And like I didn't even like give it a thought what they were saying and what I was getting into. And then they left. And then I remember just like, it washed off so easily that I'm like, oh yeah, the excitement of being around my kids, that I really was missing my parents, and I was crying for like, oh my goodness, it was really bad. I did not unpack. I would cry almost every day. And after 2 months, like, and of course parents, my wardens would keep in touch with my parents regularly, and they're like, this is normal, it's just the way things are. And after 2 months, my dad's like, so how, like, of course it's hurtful
Yeah.
for my parents too to see me this way. They're like, do you want to come back? My dad's like, life would be difficult, but it'll just make you stronger and stuff. And like, and I was like, oh my God, does that mean if I leave, people will think I'm weak? No, 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 no. That cannot happen. I'm going to stay. And it's so interesting because at the age of 9, when I'm going through so much pain of like, being separated, yet I have this part of me still decided, no, I'm going to stay because I will not let the world know that
I
I'm a
can't be
weak
weak.
person. No, so it's just so interesting. And yeah, that's it. So I after that, I think the crying stopped. I finally unpacked. And it's been interesting. Like, 9 suddenly becomes 18. You're doing everything
Yeah.
for yourself. You're doing laundry, to like managing your own homework. You're not um you're like deciding like, how much time do you want to spend watching TV and chatting with friends and studying. So it's a huge growing up curve. And I think, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
That sounds like a very interesting experience. To be honest, the fact that you mentioned how, for you at the age of 9, being weak was not an option, and obviously now all of the things that you're doing, incredibly brave, right? And it doesn't scare you, and there's a lot of confidence in there. Would you say that self-confidence is something that was taught to you, or do you think that's something that just people have it?
I think it's both. I absolutely believe self-confidence can be taught and can be enhanced in so many ways. And I also think it's a trait some people have more than others. And I'm looking back at my childhood. I think I always had a lot of it. Um, so I think it goes back to like a very happy childhood in my younger years, like, just being pampered and like being treated as princess of my grandmother's universe. And I think just the name Guria, so I think like just that, so those formative years I think were really nice for me. Like until the age of 9, I don't remember crying. I mean, like, of course, I'm sure I would have cried, but like I don't have any memories other than positive memories. And I think that was a strong foundation for me to be, to be me. Because I was given the space to be myself wherever I was, in my house, in my schools back then. And I think that allowed me to always be myself. And I think that's what this campaign is for me. Like, it's not really that I'm seeking a top position and stuff. I'm just being me, which is, listen, there's a system which is capable of doing so much great work, making a difference in the lives of people. Why are we not doing it? There's so many people suffering. So for me, I'm just being me through the process. and that foundation, I owe it to my parents and my grandparents and my extended family for giving that to me. Boarding school, of course, enhanced it. Like I was, of course, like top of my class and stuff there too. I was the house captain and valedictorian and all that stuff. So of course, it gave me all the opportunities to also be myself along the way. But I really think it's foundation. With that, I will say that I have also, when I moved to Canada, I'll share a story with you. Like when I was in India back then, I think India today is very much bilingual between Hindi and English. Like a lot of people know English. Back then, I wasn't too good in English at all. Like we would study in English, but we still spoke to our family and friends in Hindi a lot. I mean, Hindi movies were like primal. Like I don't remember watching English movies in India. I know it makes me sound like so desi, but that I think is the reality. I mean, the truth is I wasn't into movies as much. I mean, so that I have to caveat. I wasn't too much into it. So it shouldn't be said that that others are not like that. But I've never enjoyed movies too much. So I remember coming to Canada, my first day orientation at York. Everyone is calling each other like, hey, hey, hey. And I'm like, oh my God, why are they calling each other grass? Does that mean we have to call professors trees? So I'm so glad I never asked anyone that question, but I was like, oh my God, this is like such new language I'm learning. So it's like a big shock, that whole language. And then you're conscious about your accent. You're like, can they understand me? And when they make you repeat, you just get even more self-conscious. So I think Canada was that phase for me to restore my confidence and realize I'm not like them, but it's okay. But they still are open to accepting me as I am. So I just have to be me. So I think my confidence does dip when I'm in a new environment. And then it takes me a while to restore it, to be like, okay, I just have to be me. If they don't understand, I can explain myself. I can educate them. I don't have to take anything personally. So it absolutely can be learned. And that's something I would tell everyone listening, that just be you. Like Oscar Wilde said, everyone else is taken. Yeah. We each have a unique role to play, and it takes time to figure it out. It took me, honestly, my own journey to figure this out until the age of 30. And whatever it takes for you, just remember, just be you. And with that quirkiness, whatever it is that makes us, just embrace that, because that's when you start enjoying life and not having any confusions of like, oh my God, I have to read 10 self-help books, I have to do this. So yeah, I think that was my journey, but a happy childhood, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think you do absorb a lot of that from a very young age, which leads to you believing in yourself. And then when you grow up, this helps you a lot. And yeah, absolutely agree with you on that. And with the self-confidence kind of dipping with new things, that's also, I think, it's so healthy to admit to that, right? Because I feel the same. When you're starting a new job, you're starting something new, you're in a new team, you always feel like, oh, I don't know enough, no. But then eventually you grow out of it, because you think, no, listen, I've done this before, I can do this. But it's so good to admit that, okay, this happens, right? I don't just cruise through life feeling very confident the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's my big message to everyone. Is like, when you read someone's bio, when you introduce them, you're only highlighting the successes. There were 1,000 failures leading to every one of those successes. And I think we live life like just celebrating, like doing victory laps with each other. Oh my God, this is my celebration, this is yours. No. I think we really need to step back as women, especially to acknowledge that every victory has 100 hurdles you had to cross, had 200 bumps you had to go through, and even 1,000 failures. So let's talk about that, because that would allow others to be like, okay, I can do this too. I can embrace my life as it has been and continue forward. And so yeah, that's my big message to everyone, is that dips happen, failures happen, and they will happen time and again. It happens to me in some interviews where I'm like, I wish I had done that differently. And I just go on with it. And I happily talk about that too, not because I'm so proud of my failures, but more because I want to tell everyone it happens to each one of us and we don't admit it, just so I can give that opening to even that one person who's shying away from achieving their goals, from stepping up into the world stage or any stage that they want to.
That's a very important point, the whole thing about there are thousands of failures behind the success that you see. And you know how people always say, do not be envious of someone's success if you're not ready to take the pain that they've been through to get there. And I think that's absolutely true. But one question, so how do you deal with failure, whatever kind of failure it is? What is your process of getting through it?
I definitely am maturing in handling failures better as time is passing. I think I don't take failures that well, sadly.
Yeah, me either. I'm trying to learn from you.
No, I don't think anyone takes failure well, to be honest. I don't know any one person in life who takes failures well, which is, I think, the best human quality, because you then are pausing and saying, okay, what went wrong, reflecting on it, and then trying to do things differently. So I think, which is a great quality we have, right, for progress. Like, our natural inclination is to just move upward. So failures happen every day, every minute, I would say, in terms of, like, you set goals and you don't achieve, that's a failure. And how do I deal with it? I think the first thing where I've matured a lot is I've become kinder to myself, where I just am like, you know what, it happened. Let's not beat myself up, and accept it, learn, and move on. And then I try to not have that mental dialogue on and on. In the past, I would just constantly be reminding myself of that, torturing myself, and not be able to live in the present. So I think I just brush it off now. But I not brush it off like as if I don't accept it. I accept it, I learn from it, and I move on. And I think I also realize that it's so inevitable that you will fail. What I mean by failure is, of course, it's like a very high bar. I'm just saying, if my goal was this and I got here, I would call that failure. Maybe that's
perfectionism, right? Yeah.
And I think the reason I like to call it for myself is so I can then strive to even go here and go higher. So I think it's just life is a learning lesson. Brush it off, discuss, and find strategies to deal with it. And for me, those strategies are usually writing and meditating, but not talking too much. Like I realize I don't like to talk too much. Like, some people are talkers and they just love to talk about it. Like, I realize it just makes things worse for me. So I just absorb it. And I think my parents also know this when things haven't gone well on any specific thing, they don't harp on it. Like, they'll probably just say it once and let it be. So it's something I definitely don't like to talk about it. So maybe we should move on.
Yeah, let's move on. Okay. Let's go back to, you mentioned how you got involved into the UN in the first time. So once you joined the UN, what was, your first impression? What was the good? What was the bad?
So when I remember signing that dotted line, and I was like, wow, oh my goodness, all my hard work leading up to this day will now be able to make a difference on this world stage. I was thrilled to be invited to this castle on the hill, because UN comes across like such an elite organization where you must be special enough to be invited. And I was like, wow, this is an honor and a privilege, and I'm thrilled. And I turned 30, so it, of course, is like such a great place. New York is such a great place to be, right? You're like, wow, perfect place to have the third decade of my life unfold there. So I'll answer this question in like a long form by explaining what I experienced at the UN, both personally and professionally. So when I joined the UN, like in few weeks of being here, I realized that the organization that is meant to do great things in the world is not really doing it. And here's exactly what I saw. First of all, there are two UNs. There's a UN that is a decision-making body, which is Security Council, General Assembly, Economic and Social Commissions. These bodies are the ones that make decisions. And this is all we know about as a world. These are all the decision-making bodies. When you think of UN, you're like, UN, Security Council, General Assembly, September speeches, Economic and Social Commission, SDGs. But that's all. But that is just the decision-making. That's tip of the iceberg. There's a huge UN underneath that tip of the iceberg, which is responsible for implementation. And that's the learning I had. I was like, wow, I didn't even know it. That's like a $50 billion entity that has 100 entities underneath. The head is Secretary General. For every dollar they receive, 30 cents is used for the cause. Rest goes into bureaucracy. And I think that's when I realized, wow, I don't think the world knows. There are two UNs. I don't think the world knows for every dollar 30 cents goes to the cause. I don't think the world knows that the refugee crisis is not because of decision making, it's because of poor implementation. For example, we have the highest number of refugees ever today, 85 million refugees, displaced people, stateless people. And these are people who are not voters in any country. They don't have social media to tell their stories. They just have the UN, who's required to meet their basic humanitarian needs of food, clothing, shelter, security. Are we meeting that? No. We're not even meeting half, like the needs of half of the population, like half of these refugees. So the other half have to fend for themselves. And what options do these people have? They're trafficked, they're smuggled, they're lured to joining terrorist organizations as a means to protect their girls and women, or they're crossing the sea. And this is gross human rights violation and is absolutely destabilizing the world. And then I ask myself, like, wait, why are we not meeting their basic humanitarian needs? Then they say funding is not enough. And then I'm like, how is that possible? You just need $4 billion to meet their basic needs. And travel budget is $2.5 billion. That includes business and first class flights. Like, what is going on? And then when it comes to development, in 1980, China's GDP was below all but 3 African countries. And look where China is today and where Africa still is, which is a great continent, which has fantastic people, the richest in natural resources. And I think the development approach the UN has adopted in Africa is a top-down model of you give money to the top and hope it will trickle down, and it hasn't worked. And when climate was a big thing, right? Like, in 2018 and stuff. So for every climate dollar the UN gets, only 15 cents, 15% goes towards nature-based solution, which will actually help in combating climate change. Everything else goes into holding conferences and writing reports. And I was like, oh my goodness, when it comes to climate, what's there to talk about? What really is left to talk about? You just have to act. So I think just to summarize the question that you asked, the good is that the decision making is fantastic. And that gets blamed so much, the veto. But we really have to step back to say that no decision has ever prevented us meeting the basic humanitarian needs of people in crisis. May that be a crisis of conflict, may that be a crisis of natural disaster, may that be a refugee or humanitarian, any form of crisis. We have always been allowed to meet those needs, but we're not doing it. When it comes to development, that has nothing to do with Security Council. That has everything to do with the UN not using an approach that's Reaganomics and not really, being wind under their wings. It's more like a brick on their head. Climate, who's stopping us? Like climate, there's like no decision that's prevented anyone from doing anything. 15 cents on nature-based solution. So I think that has been the ugly truth and the inconvenient truth in this whole journey is that the world doesn't know about it. But what's interesting is that everyone within the UN system.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Surely other people must know this as well who work there.
I think that's the whole thing about my candidacy. So I'll step back. So of course, like I figured this out quite soon in the game, and like everyone else, I kept quiet initially because I thought my job is I'm sure I'm missing something. I'm sure this system wouldn't have been like this. Like I'm sure I'm missing something. Let me just do my job. In few weeks of being here, I get hit by a cab.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was leaving work late, midnight. It was Feb 9th, it just past midnight, and 2017. And I was leaving work on 42nd and 1st. I got hit by a cab. I was taken to the ER. I had broken my leg. I had bleeding and bruising. I didn't know the extent of internal damage. And I was thinking to myself, wow, if I had died today, what would my obituary read? Aurora was a selfish person dedicated to the pursuit of happiness for herself alone. Because until then, truth be told, I had just seeked personal and professional goals. My life, I donated a little, I volunteered a little, of course, but I didn't play a big game in life. The stakes were so narrow, the stakes were all about me. And if that had been my deathbed, I was just filled with so many regrets. I was like, oh my God, I've been a taker all my life. I've taken from my grandparents, my parents, society, women at large, and what have I given? Nothing. And I'm a person of faith, and I was just praying to God at that time. I was like, please help me get through this, and I promise I will make my life mean something if you help me get through this. So God kept his promise, and then I I'm keeping mine. So I was like, you know what, I have a unique opportunity to be at the UN at this stage. Like it's just, let me do my part in making a difference at the UN. So I tried to reform the UN internally. Because if you listen to any Secretary General or any UN senior person, they have two explanations why things are bad. We don't have the money, or the member states are a problem. And I was like, oh my goodness, both are not the problem. Absolutely not. That's not a fact. We have enough money. You know, the cash reserve of UN, the last I checked, was 30 billion.
Wow.
It's a cash reserve. And they get more than 50 billion annually, like for every dollar 30 cents goes. And I was like, that's absolutely not true. And I don't think a lot of people within the UN even know that there are 100 entities that make up the UN. There are 6 entities on climate. There are 6 research and training programs. And I wasn't able to reform the UN internally, you're kind of given 2 choices. The system just says either you leave, like the people are also open in suggesting that to you. You should leave, it's not for you. Or you have to accept things as they are and just make peace with it.
No.
And I was like, how many before me and done that? And that's when I was like, you know what, I don't want to accept that. I know, I believe in the UN. I think my foundation of belief comes from the decision making, which I really believe is doing a good job, and the employees of the UN. They are fantastic people. Like the sacrifices they make to work there is just unheard of. Like, the locations are so hardship. They visit their families infrequently, and they're still doing the job that they're hired to do. That we have great foundation, we have a great decision making. We need the right leadership to steer us into the 21st century. And I think that's why I realized that someone has to do something, and I put myself in that position to lead because no one else was doing it.
Okay.
And that happened. So I made that decision in January of 2019. After 2 years of working on the reform team, unable to reform internally. So last 2 years have been research, reading, talking to a lot of people to identify how we should move things forward. And I announced my candidacy Feb 9th, 2021, which is 4 years after the anniversary of the accident, to keep my promise to God. And and here we are.
Okay, a lot to unpack here. The first thing is, obviously, after the accident, this is wonderful that, you had like a life decision made right there for you, right? What does it mean for you to have a life of purpose, a meaningful life?
It's so liberating for me to have a life of purpose. And I want to be honest to say that life before the accident wasn't, I don't think I was entirely happy. Like I was so successful on paper. I was like one of the youngest professors writing audit standards, and like on paper I had reached the height of my profession. But I don't know, I just wasn't satisfied from inside. Like it was like always something better I was chasing. I don't really know. After the accident, it's just that my life became so simple. Like having been so close to that death, you realize all these trophies, all these like everything else in the face of death doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how you feel you have made a difference in the lives of others. Like you're not that self-centered. So I think it simplified my life so much, which is why I still am in the studio apartment that I first moved in. And like, it's just made it so simple. I don't have complications or difficult choices to make anymore. It's all about serving others. And I think the purpose journey is where it was just a coincidence that I was at the UN at that time. So that then ended up becoming my purpose. That I was like, okay, let me just do the job I have been told to do to the best of my ability and make a difference. So I did do that. And when I realized that I wasn't able to change that $1 to 30 cents to try to double it because the system wasn't, the leadership wasn't interested in that, that's when I realized, okay, what do I do now? Do I leave, or do I put my head down and just take the salary and live a comfortable life? And I think that's when I realized that it's so easy to be a taker. I have to give. It requires sacrifices, and I'm going to do it. So so it's made my life much happier. Difficult for sure, challenging for sure. Like I don't think I've had a proper 8-hour sleep in a long time. So, and I think UN has been on my mind every day, every minute, that I don't even think I've ever switched it off. but it's totally worth it. I really hope it'll. I'm confident that a new UN is going to be born soon, which will allow people to be part of the solution hands-on. And this candidacy, I think, something I didn't realize at that time, but I'm now coming to the grip of it, that it's inspiring so many people, our generation, to run for positions, to not accept mediocrity. Because if you think about it, we are a generation that has made private sector ethical. Like, private sector is no longer about just profit for yourself, it's profit for society, it's sustainable profit. Why is it that we're okay with governments and international organizations not doing things efficiently? Why? We are inheriting the consequences of their poor results. We have to do something about it. And a lot of time we just stop at like talking and like, tweeting about it or doing the post. No, we have to take it through. Someone has to take it through. So I think this ownership of like, wait, government is made of people. We have to fix it if it's not working. So I think that's just really uplifting for me to see that that our generation is being involved in public sector in a more meaningful way than just voting and moving on.
Oh, totally agree. I think representation is important, right? So seeing someone like you, who is like me, woman of color, who is young as well, and doing something like that, it is sending a very strong message out there, right? And I think you're doing a wonderful job. But what I want to ask you is, do you still remember the moment where it clicked for you that, okay, I'm going to announce my candidacy?
I think I always knew I was going to announce it. So I knew I was going to run 2021.
Okay.
And in 2021, I'll step back. So 2019, when I decided to run, it was, of course, like, a daunting task, but at least I had 2 years ahead of me to plan. And then 2019, I finished Columbia University, like I finished all the courses, so the learning and education was done. And to 2020, I was really looking forward to the planning and like putting it all together. And then COVID
Of course.
And it's so interesting. COVID happened, of course, in December of 2019, but I think the effect of that, we saw it in March with the lockdown. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, and like, at that time, my brain was like, I'm sure the lockdown.
Oh yeah, we all thought that.
I think it's yeah, right? Like, we all thought that, and now here we are with like
more than a year later. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think it kind of, I think I realized in July of 2020 that it was going to be a lockdown all the way through. So then the decision of date was always, exactly when do you announce it was always there. One of the dates I was toying with was the date, January 24th, the day Macintosh was released. So, one of my big influencers has been Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs has been so critical in ushering the fourth revolution in so many ways. And one of the big was Mac, this Macintosh. And back then, IBM was the biggest player in the business. And IBM said, computers are too smart, people are too dumb, we can't make personal computers. And he was the one who changed the game. He said, no, people are smart, you just have to give them an equipment that would work. And he ushered personal computers, and here we are with our iPhones and apps and everything. So he was the guy who trusted people over systems. And I've always been inspired by him. And I was like, that would be a great day to go against the big blue, because, back then Macintosh was like going against the big blue of its time, like David and Goliath. So we were like, it would be a good idea to do it on 24th. But then 24th was his story. It wasn't really my story. So then I realized, Feb 9th is my story. If I hadn't had that accident, I would never have been doing what I ended up doing. I would have been living my life like before, most likely, and might have made peace with things and not challenged status quo. So that ended up being Feb 9th. So I think that date was determined like around December of 2020 that I knew that was going to be the date. But I have to tell you, just clicking that button of it wasn't easy. It was like, I had drafted this email for all colleagues of the UN that I was going to send to everyone. And I was like, my fellow colleagues, today I announced my candidacy. Oh my goodness. And just realizing that you're sending it to the world was just, it was real nerve wracking. I think I sent it I want to say like around 2
Oh, wow.
a.m. Yes, on
Oh,
Feb
wow.
9. And I didn't sleep that whole night. It was just so weird. And it's so interesting. I was looking at my phone and I actually do have a 15-minute video
Oh,
of that
wow.
night. And I said, you know what, let me commemorate this night because I know I'll never be able to go back again because, your experiences end up shaped. Like you end up becoming a different person every day that you don't know, you can't go back in that mindset again. So I did record it and I was listening to a bit of it. It's so interesting. I was listening to a bit of it and I realized I've been talking the same thing all along.
That's
So
a good thing.
nothing
Yeah.
changed in message. The same. But yeah, it was so, Sheen, it's just so hard to describe, right? Like you think you have all the confidence to press that button, but I remember I was shaking internally when I had to press it because I knew now
Now it's
everyone in the
public.
system would
Yeah.
get it. Public, and I sent it at a time where I knew New York didn't wake up
You are
to
like
it.
safe. Everyone is asleep.
So I kind of wanted to do it that way. I didn't want New York to wake up to it. Like, I wanted it to start with the Asian market and for New York to like have a few hours
Yeah.
before they wake up and see it. So yeah, it was so interesting to send it.
Wow.
And now, yeah, I think that is like so many emotions at that time. But at one point I was like, you know what, let's just do it. And then I just put my laptop down and I just went for a walk for a bit.
So then what kind of responses did you get immediately after when people started seeing it?
Do you know, I have to say, I did not get the first response until 7 or 8
Oh, wow.
a.m.
Okay.
So I actually sent the message when I was at work. I sent the message. So I live like right next to, so my apartment and UN are like right next to each other. It's like a 2-minute walk. So I sent it from work. And I think I didn't get the first one, like I said, until 7 or 8. And one person, I remember, like sent a message like, "Oh my God, your account is hacked." And I just didn't respond to any message at that time. I was like, someone said that your account is hacked. A couple people responded by saying, "Oh my God, thank you so much. This is like so wonderful." So it's just so hard to relive that day now. Like I think the journey ahead is so long that I haven't had the time to relive those memories. But I think the emails from employees were very supportive. Like, there were a lot of people who reached out and they're like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. I fully agree with you. And I'm so glad someone is doing it. Kudos." So it was so overwhelming.
Oh, wow. Well, I can't imagine. Like, I'm sure it was overwhelming in all the senses, but that's so cool. And then, like, since then, right, you've had such a huge journey and now you have a whole team who works with you and you have people behind you. How does that feel, having a group? For example, there's someone who manages your calendar and someone who just tells you where to turn up and do what. Like, how was that for you, that transition from being a one person to now being a team?
I think the biggest transition was the fact that I wasn't even on LinkedIn until the day before the campaign.
Wow.
So I wasn't even on Twitter. I opened my Twitter and Instagram account the first week of January. I think Twitter was like January 2nd. I was like, I need to get the hang of this before I launch this campaign. So it was, so for me, it was a huge shock of opening myself to the public. Like I wasn't, I was such a private person. So I think for me, that journey was, and I'll tell you one thing, that I didn't do a lot of interviews in March. So like, of course, February happened, and I think New York Times is where things went global. And in March, I actually didn't do that many interviews at that time. Like, I would kind of like manage my calendar quite spaciously in terms of like I would do 2 or 3 interviews a day, max 4. But now it's like 8. Like now it's back to back. And I think that did take me a learning curve to get used to it. Like, to have consistent energy and consistent momentum on a back to back. Like I have a call in 20 minutes now and another one. So it was a practice. And I think without a team, you cannot do anything. Like, and I think that's what I realized, like the job of a leader is by the end of the day, that you have to create an environment for others to accomplish their goal through your shared goal. Like for me, I'm here not because, like I said, I seek the position of SG, like as if I had political ambitions walking into the job. For me, it's because there's a problem that needs to be solved, and we are the generation that can solve it. We need women leadership. We need youth more involved. We need someone with ideas now. Like, for far too long, we've given this job to one profile of people that we need to bring in ideas and fresh perspective. With that, I think all the people who are part of the team now believe in that. And they believe in expressing that in different ways, like, the volunteer management. So Rohan Barad, who of course you've interacted with, he's my deputy chief of staff. Like he's been so involved in managing a lot of things. And as I see his leadership unfold through this, you realize that a lot of people like who are managing volunteers now, they come up with such great ideas that all I have to do is step back and let them be themselves. And as long as we're going towards a shared goal that we need a new UN and we need it now and we need to be part of it together, it's just beautiful. So I'm honestly humbled and thrilled, and I'm just eager to allow everyone in the world to achieve their potential in any way, if that means through doing this podcast, even if, like I said, it encourages one person to say, hey, if she can do it, I can do it. And someone who, like an NGO who feels like their voice isn't being heard, to give them a platform through my vision statement. So I'm just thrilled that the world is part of this with me, and they're achieving their goals.
So have you experienced any kind of pushback? Obviously you're a woman and you're a woman of color. Have you received any kind of like nasty pushback on these fronts?
So I would say that not a pushback per se, but of course there is there is that shock to the system. Like, the system is used to seeing this job by a certain age group. That suddenly you come in with half that age and say that you can do the job. It is taking a while for system to adapt to it. And I think my job is I just have to educate and inform them. Like I want to make sure that the Secretary General election process is a fair and transparent one, where stereotypes, biases, and discrimination doesn't happen. Discrimination because of my gender or my age should not be the criteria to prevent me from presenting my case. And of course it's happening. I won't deny it. It is happening. My job is to just educate and inform member states to be their best selves, to be the better version of who they can be, and to rise above their biases. Because it's a natural human tendency to be, a bit tribal. Hey, you look like me, you must be great. And to to allow them to say, that's not a way to live human life. We're all different. We have to embrace differences. And I think I try to remind member states all the time, what's at stake in this election is UN's ability to demonstrate that it doesn't just preaches gender equality, youth inclusiveness, it practices it. And also it tells the entire world to have free and fair elections. And on you, the member state, rests that ability to demonstrate that a closed election like Secretary General, which is like, in a controlled environment, can happen in a fair and transparent manner. So it's my job to educate and inform them. With that said, of course, there are biases. I won't deny it. And it's unfortunate.
Okay.
We'll get through it. Change takes education, and I'm educating, and you're educating with me, so thank you. And to anyone listening, I think I would just say, don't be scared if young, just because of our age or gender, we're ignored. We'll just keep educating them. That's all we can do.
Exactly. As long as we keep powering through, they'll learn eventually. Final question for you, what are the biggest changes you want to see in the UN if you were to win the election?
So the biggest change I would like to see is that we have to take our role as humanitarian agency with respect and take job through completion. For example, refugee crisis, we need to make sure that we address the basic humanitarian needs of all refugees, give them food, clothing, shelter, security. And once we are able to address that, we need to do everything in our power to depopulate those refugee camps. We can't have people in refugee camps stay forever. Today, the average age a person stays in refugee camp is 17 years.
Oh my God.
Half of the refugees are kids. So we need to make sure that while they're there, we're educating them so we can quickly depopulate them through repatriation, local integration, or resettlement. And local integration means allowing them to work while they're there. And Uganda and Turkey are two countries that allow local integration, where, like, if you have a refugee card, you can blend in and seek employment opportunities, and then perhaps also become a citizen of Uganda and start a family there. Local integration. Repatriation means you allow them to go back to their country. And how do you allow them to go back? By addressing the issue that led them to leave it in the first place. Was that a conflict? Was that a natural disaster? Was that a human rights abuse or violation? So that is critical, and that needs to be prioritized. No ifs and buts around that. When it comes to development, we cannot, our model for development is hold a conference, write a report, and that's it. We cannot just become a paper tiger of all the ideas and not implement or take anything through. So we need to focus on two things which will allow the most countries to get to develop, which is global internet, universal internet, and universal online education. That will allow people to develop and uplift themselves out of poverty. India is a great example that developed because of digitization, lifted people out of poverty, and that's something we need. Today, only half of the world has access to internet, and we've landed on Mars and Moon. Imagine if all of us had it, we would be living on Pluto. When it comes to climate, honestly, in 20 years from now, we won't be talking about this election. We would be talking where we'll stay because of the climate crisis.
Yeah, where do we go?
So instead of having 15 cents to $1 go on nature-based solution, we need 85 cents to go on nature-based solution. And here we can use two untapped talents that we haven't explored. First of all, youth. Today, majority of the world is youth, under 35, the definition. Youth unemployment is something that affects every country, but it's a huge opportunity to employ them to address climate crisis, to address biodiversity, to address climate, to address climate action, and employ them. Because the thing is about youth, we expect so much from them. We expect them to live in the most difficult time in the world, which is they're digital natives. Like, the stress of mental health that all this technology brings is something they have to bear that we didn't have to bear as much. Job insecurity. It's not easy to get a job anymore. So it's an uncertain future we're giving them. It's an uncertain future even in terms of climate, that we need to do our best to give them employment opportunities to seek economic freedom for themselves. When it comes to climate, another investment we need to make is climate entrepreneurs. We have these Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who come up with the next best camera app or a Snapchat and all these things, which is fantastic, of course, but it's not like make or break for the world. So we need to invest in climate entrepreneurs. We need to do things differently, produce new products that are environmentally friendly so we can replace the old ones that are not. And that is the vision I see for the UN, and I see everyone involved in meaningful ways. I see our generation taking leadership position at the UN. Today, the average age of UN leadership is 62. I really think that we need to give 25% position to young people. And the system will totally be different.
Oh, wow. This is very well planned out. I loved it. And I love how you know this. It just comes out so fluently. But yeah, I'm very, very much looking forward. I wish you the best of luck in the election. And you have a #1 fan here. So best of luck. And thank you so much for your time today, Akanksha. I hope you had fun. I definitely learned so much from you.
I had such a great time. You're a fantastic host, and I've heard a couple of your other episodes. I think it's just so uplifting, the work that you do, and thank you so much for the conversation.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you, and we'll be in touch.